Shalom and welcome to Practical Spirituality here at Asia Torah in the old city of Jerusalem overlooking the Temple Mount. Today's class is entitled God Hates Religion. It's part of a large curriculum of classes. I don't know how many of them I will do, but we'll at least get started. And please, if you're watching this on Facebook, please hit share and send it out there because they're just going to break me, you know. Because to get anything out on Facebook, once you daily feed, they actually make sure nothing gets out if you don't pay for boosts. So I do get phone calls of people to join my club. I do have a club. It's anywhere between $10 to $100 a month, where you're in the Got Your Back Club, which is all my social media, so I can hire people to handle my social media. Because it's enough, like we're at the end of days, things are getting hot out there, it's getting rough. And I believe that the things I'm saying from the feedback I'm getting, it needs to get out there more. And so I'm not optimized as much as I should be in social media. And so keeping people working for me, we have this club called the Got Your Back Club, and we earmark the money for that. Right now it's going to PayPal, but we're going to get rid of that. And no offense to PayPal, but we're going to be creating a nonprofit so that people can actually get tax deductions and etc., that kind of thing. So feel free to join the Got Your Back Club, and it's a nice club to be part of.
Got your back, one word, lowercase?
Yeah, it's not a website at this point, but it's it's just PayPal. You create a recurring payment on PayPal under Glaser at aish.com. Glaser, Glaser. That's what you need for online. It's Aren't you all writing this? Why? Because $10 a month's too much?
I'm happy to listen.
$10 a month's too much?
Why
Glaser at aish.com. I tell you, I have $10 a month going to so many different things, and plus much more than $10 a month for certain things. Because I give all the front horses as much possible help as possible, and I'm also on all over the web for helping other people's causes, because I put my money where my mouth is, and so. Anyway, so that's where it's at. So anyway, it's on PayPal. It's yglaser@aish.com. Glaser. Aish is AISH. Okay, today we're doing God Hates Religion, and the deal's like this. Imagine that you have a Facebook account, and you're really into Facebook, and or an Instagram account. And you're really into Instagram, or what's that other one called?
Snapchat.
What?
Snapchat.
Snapchat, and you're really into it. And one day you get to your account, you wake up in the morning, which of course most people wake up like this these days. So you wake up in the morning, and because your phone's already in your hands, and they have a new halacha that you're allowed to wash Negelwasser after that message. Just kidding. So anyway, you get to your account, and there it is. But you're not really able to post. And instead, someone else is madly posting, wildly posting, and they're posting all kinds of crazy stuff as you. Imagine you get your social media account and you've had what's called identity theft, but this is cyberspace identity theft. This is the kind where someone's posting all kinds of stuff about you. And somehow they got a hold of like your pictures online that you'd never post. And they're getting posted as well with strange stories behind them that didn't happen, and it's just going on and on. I mean, you're in the middle of full like identity theft, character assassination. You can't get it in there. They've got all your codes. They've changed all your passwords, and they've also they've already let them know that there's going to be someone pretending they're you, who's going to be phoning them. And so there's just no way out of this. And it's just going on. It's already been weeks. You're starting to hire people who are like high-tech people to like somehow hack in there. And they just keep saying, I don't know who this person is, but they're better than I am. Can't get in. So now you know why God hates religion. Because God's identity has been hacked. It's been hijacked. And And you who are my dear students who come to my classes, you all know who God is, obviously, or what God is. And what is God? Excellent. What is God?
Everything and nothing.
Excellent. He's everything, but he's also nothing. And we have no idea who he is whatsoever. We don't know who he is because obviously before there was a world, there was nothing. And before creation, there was nothing. And that nothing obviously is whatever made the creation. So therefore, whatever made creation is nothing. And your brain, you can't even think about nothing. Like you can't get near nothing. Like you probably think there's nothing in my hand, for example. Is there nothing in my hand?
No,
Molecules.
It's full of air. You can't even think about nothing. But anyway, God is absolutely nothing. We know nothing about God. Nothing. But what happens is religions, they decide who God is. Religions create God in their image, and whatever works for them. You like that? Religion creates God in their image. Whatever works for them, they do. They generally do what's called manipulation in a big way. They manipulate their constituents. How do you manipulate a person? You play on their fears. You play on their fears. Tell me, what's the number one fear of humanity?
Death.
Death. Number one fear of humanity is death. If you were going to buy something and the salesperson's like starting to get manipulative, are you going to hang out in that store much longer? No. When someone's selling something, they're being manipulative, you just run for your life. I mean, that's just weird. Awkward, like getting manipulated by a salesperson. So obviously, if you're in sales, you're manipulating. So how are you supposed to deal with that? Because if you get caught manipulating in sales, you're in trouble. But your whole job as a salesperson is to help a person perceive value, which means you got to manipulate the way that person thinks about a product in such a way that they purchase it. Which means you better be either very subtle or extremely fair in the way you manipulate people. But one thing for sure is you can't play with people's deepest fears because that's just outright manipulative. Well, if the number one fear of humanity is death, and death is the number one thing on the lips of religion, because they can't stop talking about people's end game and what's going to happen to you, which of course they're totally making up because you'd have to die to prove them wrong. And that ain't fun. Hate to die to have to prove someone wrong. So you have to die to prove them wrong, and it's all about your end game after you're alive. So you're completely manipulating people about their death and what might be over there. And therefore, my version of God is the version. And hence, God's dealing with serious identity theft by the world's religions. Now, it just so happens that Judaism is not a religion, and that's why around the Jewish circles, at least those who are not religious, like myself, you will never hear the word religious going on. We don't say the word religion, we don't say the word religious. We do use which words? From, observant, yeah, Shomer mitzvah, personally observant. So the number one best word to use about keeping Torah probably is observant, meaning you're actually observing the tribal tradition. And amazingly and super humbly, Judaism never purports to know who God is. And the more you look into our Kabbalistic books, the more you discover that they really don't say who God is. They really, the deeper you go into these Kabbalistic works, which are about God, you find out that we know nothing. We really don't know anything about God. We know a ton about creation, meaning how God did whatever he did. That we know a lot about because we have a long, intense Kabbalistic tradition about that. But who God is? No clue. We don't know who God is. And therefore, it's a very humble position that we come from. And then, and you'll notice something else bizarre is that if you're going to be tricking people into thinking God is something that he's not and holding the next world over his head, so you have to either ask very little of them, of the people, because you're making this all up. So you got to hope they don't ask too many questions. Now, one of the ways that you deal with that is by having as little resistance as possible, which means you want to make your religion as simple as possible. And not only do you want to make your religion as simple as possible, if you do increase, and here's the not so nice part, if you increase difficulty, you have to increase enforcement. Meaning you have to break out machetes. You have to there has to be some kind of violence going on. One of the reasons, now obviously Christianity has had its horribly violent times, but horribly, like full on, the word Black Friday, I say Black Friday? It's kind of funny they call it Black Friday. What was I trying to say? Black Sabbath. The reason why it was called there's a term Black Sabbath was because 3 towns of Jews that lived along the Rhine River in Central Europe, these were the towns of the greatest scholars in all of the Jewish world. The town of Speyer, like anyone named Spiro or Shapiro, they're all from Speyer. The town of Worms and the town of Mainz. These 3 towns were the pinnacle of holiness of the Jewish people in exile. These were like, if you wanted to meet what a Second Temple Jew was like, you could actually go to these towns. For almost 1,000 years, you could go to these towns and meet what a Second Temple Jew was like. With all the Torah of the Second Temple, period. Meaning all the lessons and all the oral law was still being kept. They were really high-level towns. And they also had the original prayer, really the original prayers that were redacted for exile. They had the most original version of all those. On one Sabbath, the Christians came through and killed every man, woman, and child. No Jew was left alive in those 3 towns in one Shabbat, one Shabbos. And it got named Black Sabbath.
And the Crusade.
Yeah, it was Crusaders.
Ozzy Osbourne named his band?
Yeah, it wasn't a great idea, but he didn't know what he was doing. Is Ozzy Osbourne Jewish?
At all?
He's probably Jewish. He didn't know what he was doing. He's just...
I think eating bats is trade, so
Anyway, so that's where the term Black Sabbath comes from. And that Sabbath is celebrated once a year. And I had guests over. Have you heard of a rabbi named Rabbi Aaron Neckemeyer? So he keeps full German traditions because he's from a German family. I mean, listen to the name Neckemeyer. It's like next to Oscar Mayer. And it's a German name. It's from a German family. And they came over to my house once for Shabbos, and they were not wearing Shabbos clothes. And I was like, aren't you guys going to change? It's Shabbos. They're like, no, we don't change this Shabbos. Because German Jews wear weekday clothes to commemorate this Shabbos of when the Jews were killed. He happened to be at my house on Black Sabbath. I forget what Shabbos that is during the year. Someone could Google it. What day is Black Sabbath? Now, imagine God has his chosen people, his treasured nation, that experienced prophecy on Mount Sinai. And then religions can't deal with us. Because they can't deal with any tribes. The Crusaders, we weren't their own enemy. Any tribe they found, whatever country they imperialized, as they mowed through, whether they mowed through with Rome or whether they mowed through with Spain or whether whoever they were with at the time, mowing through, they would always take the indigenous culture and destroy them, usually through venereal diseases, but also through just pure war tactics. And a lot of these people, a lot of these crusaders are thought of fairly highly in history, but we do not think highly of them as Jews, nor did any of the tribes in the world that were destroyed by their crusades. Now,
By the way, Ozzy Osbourne isn't Jewish, but his wife is.
his wife's Jewish.
Yeah.
Thank you for that piece of information. Did they say which day's Black Sabbath?
It's something about witchcraft, doesn't it?
Didn't find it.
Yeah, weird stuff.
Someone, you could Google you could Google Spire, the Massacre of Jews, or Massacre of Jews, Black Sabbath, maybe. Okay, so God's not so excited about religion. Now let's go into modern times. So here's something I've been working on a little bit. I'd like to share it with you, and you tell me what you think. The Western society, the theology of modern Western culture, which is the Christian culture, the Western modern society, what was it?
11th of July, 1942.
What?
Right? No, that's not right.
1942. This is Crusader.
Yeah, I said Black Sabbath 42 is the film.
That probably was a specific thing.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Anyway, the Western Christian theology, for an atheist intellectual like Sam Harris, for example, for an atheist, or Richard Dawkins, or any of these people, who's the physicist that died? Stephen Hawking. For Western intellectual atheists, it's an insult. The theology is an insult to our intellect. Meaning Western Christian theology is an insult to our intellect. But the actual intellectual atheists, who are quite brilliant, are, when they poke holes in it, which is the simplest thing to do in the world, it's not exactly a how do we say, compliment to them that they can poke holes in something silly. You understand? If you're really brilliant and now you're walking around like patting yourself on the back for poking holes in something that's idiotic, like, what are you so proud of? You understand? But these guys walk around and they're on YouTube and they themselves are kind of like religious figures in a way. The intellectual atheists, raise your hand, have you ever watched any of these intellectual atheists on YouTube? You guys have seen them? So they're walking around all excited that they were able to poke holes, but you got to understand, listen carefully to what I'm saying. These guys are the intellectual atheists are the high priests of secular culture. They're the high priests of secular culture because the average secular culture don't feel intellectually fortified to explain their lifestyle. But as long as there's a Sam Harris, and as long as there's a Richard Dawkins, as long as there's a Stephen Hawking, as long as there's these guys out there, so now I'm somehow absolved of my guilt for my secular behavior. You understand? But the funny thing is these great intellectuals, if they're really so great, they shouldn't be that excited about poking holes in stuff that's silly. I mean, I don't think there's a person in this room, and I'm sure you're all intelligent people, but I don't think there's a person in this room who couldn't destroy most religious theology. If not all religious. I mean, I know some of you in this room pretty well already. You could probably take down every single theology in a matter of minutes. Almost all of you in this room. So, but meanwhile, these are like intellectual elites who have become the priesthood of the secular world over their modern religion takedown of Christianity, Islam, and Mormonism, and all these other things. I mean, they're just patting themselves on the back, and I see people like Sam Harris in like a robe as the high priest of the secular community. But here's the sad thing: is that I recently got I recently was sent by a friend of mine who's a secular Israeli, who sent me a post. He sent me a video of a particularly brilliant intellectual. I mean, a really brilliant guy. I wish I knew his name. He's in England. Tim something or other. He's a musician. He's like a really, really good musician. And he had like a full orchestra. I wish I knew his last name. Anyway, the guy's quite brilliant. He looks completely nuts. I mean, the guy looks psycho. But he,
Is he the guy who wrote Matilda?
maybe, what's, you know the last name?
No, but he's crazy.
Can you look up the last name? Is he plays,
No, sorry, he wrote the Matilda musical.
it could be he had a giant orchestra with him. And he looks totally nuts. He had like eye makeup on and like,
Yeah, I think so.
yeah, what's his last name? Look it up for me. Anyway, but the guy's particularly brilliant and does like this impromptu song that's just destroying the Christian version of God. But here's the thing: a Jew from Haifa is using this theology. Sorry, a Jew from Haifa is using this intellectual as the basis why this Jew doesn't keep Torah.
Is that
Yeah, that guy's a crazy guy.
Tim Minchin?
Tim what?
Minchin.
Minchin. Yeah.
Minchin, the comedian.
You've heard of him?
Of course.
He's brilliant. And the guy's a genius.
I never knew he was Jewish.
He's not Jewish.
Oh,
He's not even close to Jewish.
yeah, exactly.
There are brilliant people who aren't Jewish, you know.
I didn't say that. I didn't know that Tim Minchin was Jewish.
How do you say his last name again?
I think his name's Minchin.
Minchin.
M-I-N-C.
Minchin. Anyway, really, really funny stuff. So, anyway, but a Jew can't have intellectuals poking holes in infantile theologies and suddenly feel okay about not keeping Shabbos. You understand how that works? Does that make sense to you all? Did you get that? Everyone understood that? Now, what would happen if you took Minchin, what was his first name again? Tim Minchin, and you put him in front of the Vilna Gaon? What if you took Sam Harris and put him in front of the Vilna Gaon and let them actually chat for an hour? Not that the Vilna Gaon would take time away from Torah study to do that, but just theoretically, you know, it's more likely that we could get to the Vilna Gaon through time travel technology than the Vilna Gaon would actually give an hour from his Torah study to talk to a guy named Tim Minchin. That's more likely we could get to the Vilna Gaon than through time travel. But if somehow we could interrupt the Rambam or Vilna Gaon, or if we could just take like a few minutes off the time of Rabbi Akiva Eger or the Ramban, or if we could just get some of the Bali Tosfos to talk for an hour, or we could just get Rebbe Meir or Rebbe Akiva or Rebbe Shimon or Rebbe Yishmael or Rava or Rabba or Rav Papa or you know, should I just keep going? Because the list just goes on and on and on and on and on and on. And first of all, whoever would be having this discussion with the rabbi would be so out of his depth that there wouldn't even be like common language for at least a year of engagement before they could get to the common language, because you cannot have an argument that is even a little bit of like intellectual wholeness or standard without common ground. You got to have common terms. You got to have common ground a little bit to start talking. So that would take a year to develop that. Then they could start talking about perhaps Jewish theology, maybe. And this is all given that the guy truly is a genius, who's the secular apologetic. How do you like my silence?
It's peaceful.
It's definitely.
That's deafening.
Talk to you.
So the question is, where are we all from? Like, how did we get here?
From a plane, probably.
How did us Jews get here? Welcome, ladies.
Thank you.
We have seats for each of you.
Thank you.
One there and two here.
Okay.
I like, you want to move them? Not a good idea in the middle of a class. Not a good idea right now.
Okay.
Yeah, just jump in. Jumping on in. Is it cold out?
Sometimes
Old City gets its own bone chill and stone thing.
you shall mind it is,
It's really quite fascinating that this world that we've inherited, called Judaism, is we're at our meaning what I can articulate, and I know a lot of you come to my classes because of the way I articulate things. What I articulate in Judaism, which today is like my least articulate day ever. In fact, I just did 30-second silence. That's not very articulate. My ability to articulate Torah or Judaism is, I don't know what the right number would be, but I guess it would be 1/1000th maybe of my teacher, who is this, the Kabbalist I go to on Thursday nights. He's articulate. Although I don't think anyone in this room would understand a word he's saying.
He speaks Hebrew though, right?
English, but it's, I mean, if you call that English. You can imagine sitting in a class, it's like a 6-hour class, Thursday nights till dawn. And no one in this room would understand a word of it. And the only reason I know that is because I don't. Which makes me really wonder what I'm sitting there for. But I just feel like something's gonna go in someday. I'm with him now 24 years. And but a lot's gone in, obviously, after 24 years. His ability to articulate what his Rebbe taught is about 1,000th of what his teacher taught him, whose name was Shlomo Twersky of Denver, Colorado. What he was doing in Denver, Colorado, where there were barely even 10 Jews, keeping Shabbat in those days, was a bit of a mystery. What this great Rebbe was doing in Denver, Colorado.
It's quite a community there. It was slaughtering of beef and chicken.
Oh, because they were slaughtering beef and chicken. Oh, that makes sense.
There were 25,000 from Jews.
Nice, okay. Really? 25,000 Jews? Were you in Denver in those days?
I was in Denver 20 years ago. This is going back before there. Mordechai's supposed to be there.
Yeah, 20 years ago? Yeah, his son. Anyway, the further back you go, the more intense it gets. The further back you go, and I only got to someone who was alive when I was born. But when you go to his Rebbe, and then to his Rebbe, we're talking about people who could articulate such intense, complex secrets of creation that they themselves earned the ability of clairvoyance through it. They themselves had earned clairvoyance through it. And you can hear story after stories of these amazing stories, and even meet the people who were born from some of the clairvoyant things that happened that led to a marriage, that you can actually meet people in the flesh today. Sunday, I was at a yurt side, someone made a l'chaim Sunday, and he was in the flesh, the product of a clairvoyant Rebbe who had touched his grandfather in a certain way that led to certain things that ultimately led to his father being born and him being born. So like we got in the flesh, magical, mystical people who lived not so long ago. But as you go really far back, you have the people who can articulate it like nobody else. And that is just the children of Israel, the ancient Hebrews who lived in Israel. They lived here, where we are. Now, I just want you to think who was surrounding them at the time. Who was around them? Who was around them were, first of all, literacy. What do you think the world literacy was like back then?
2 or 3%.
Then? 2 or 3, it was 2 or 3% like, I think 200 years ago in Europe.
0.1%.
What?
0.1%.
Maybe 0.1%. I don't know. It was next to zero literacy. And here you have the Jewish nation that's not just literate, but massively articulate about the nature of reality, such that the greatest intellectual today, who stands on the shoulders of giants of the Industrial Revolution, the Enlightenment movement, and all the work that's been done in the evolution of philosophy, psychology, etc., the ones standing on the shoulders of giants like Sam Harris, for example, who couldn't even have a conversation with my Rebbe and understand what the hell he's talking about. And my Rebbe knows all his arguments like in his back pocket. And he wouldn't even be able to understand my Rebbe's theology if it took him seriously a year, a full immersion. And I'm way more immersed. I also know how to think, and I'm 24 years with the Rebbe and still don't understand him.
What's the name of the Rabbi again, please?
His name's Rav Shalom Friedman. He's Rav Mordechai Twersky, who he met in Denver. He's his brother-in-law. The Rebbe married his daughter to Rav Shalom Friedman. His wife gives shiurim in the Old City that are really down-to-earth, understandable classes. So women, be aware that there is a shiur by Rebbetzin Malki Twersky. Sorry, Friedman. Yeah, I put her back on her maiden name.
Freedman?
Friedman with a D. And anyone born Jewish is allowed to come, males are allowed to come to the Thursday night class with me, that if they'd like to come out there with me to the Rebbe. Not that you'll understand anything. And the reason why you have to be born Jewish is because he's teaching deep Kabbalistic wisdom that's forbidden to teach to Gentiles.
If you're converted,
And apparently women.
Oh, did I say born Jewish?
yeah.
Sorry. Born Jewish or converted. And by the way, his 2 number 1 students, meaning the 2 types of students that are his closest students, he has very few students because no one can get near him. But the 2 students that hang around him are Bali Tshuva and converts. You don't want to know why? Because they at least, he flips his whole entire life upside down every day. So the only people who ever can stick to him are people who flip their lives upside down at least once. You have to have at least once flipped your life over. And if you flipped your life over once, you can maybe hang around him for a while. But you have to know that if you ever try to hang around him, he's like a top spinning. You know, it's got a lot of centrifugal force, so he's always trying to throw you away. Not throw you away, but throw you off of him. You have to be able to withstand being pushed away at all times. All the years. It'll never change. He'll just push you away the whole time. There was one time he forgot himself. I don't know how it happened, but he was really proud of me over something. And he forgot himself for a moment and patted me on the shoulder. I froze. His family, went into fright. They all were there. And I turned around, I was like, what was that? And you know what he says to me? He says, it was a pitch. Means a spank. He quickly flipped it to a spank. You know, he one time did one nice thing towards me in 24 years.
Why?
And I asked him, shocked, what was that? And he was, in the split second, was able to say, it was a spank.
But why?
Why is he so mean?
Yeah.
I asked him that once in front of the whole class, actually. I said to him, listen, we're converts. I'm not a convert, but we're converts, or we're Bali Tshuva. Like, you're all we've got for a father, Rebbe. Like, can't we have a little love? I said this in the middle of class. These guys were like ready to fall out of their chairs that I did this, because you can hear a pin drop the entire time. But whatever, I'm crazy, and I was probably hungover and in a funny mood or something. Anyway, but I managed to say that to the Rebbe. You know what his reply was? He looks at me with disdain, like his eyes get small, and he looks at me and says, "You don't want love from me. I'm here to get you to the next world. That ain't easy." Speaking of the next world,
What does he talk about? Really?
we're not sure. So, anyway, but then he said something really beautiful. You know what he said? He says, you guys got to be here for each other. Full exposure. Stop holding your cards close to your chest. Be there for each other. Take care of each other. Support each other. He said that to us. But don't ask me for that. Yeah, he's hardcore. I once found a Hasidic man who asked to come to the Rebbe. You know, the full pays and everything. So we go to the Rebbe, and right before he starts the class, he pulls me aside and he says, you see that Hasidic man over there at the table? I was like, yeah. He says, can you please ask him to leave? I'm like, I just brought this guy. Like, I drove him out, you know. And I'm like, why, Rebbe? And he says, he's not Jewish. I'm like, are we talking about the same guy? The Hasidic guy? He's like, not Jewish. Please take him out. So I go out the house. I go up to the guy very nicely. He said, can I speak to you privately? I took him out of the house. I said, is there something you didn't tell me about your Judaism? And he like turned white. He's like, well, I'm converted. And so I said, the Rebbe said, you know, come back after you converted, because it's a Kabbalah class. And the guy came back like a year later, and he stuck to the Rebbe for years. Stuck to the Rebbe. Many years he was there. Okay. I just feel like telling Rebbe stories right now. You want one more story? Speaks in the chase. From Denver. One more story?
Yeah.
Here's a really funny story. Great story. So there's a Breslover Chassid in Tzfat. The Breslover Chassid named Yonah Binyamin Akiva. And he was my student here at Aish years ago. So there's hope for all of you. You may become a Breslov Chassid living in Tzfat. So anyway, he was my student here at Aish. And at that point, he was finding himself Hasidically, and someone told him that maybe you should come to Yom Tov's rabbi and see what you think. Now, in those days, Rabbi Friedman, the Rebbe, he would sit with, I mean, it's a little crazy how reclusive he is, but he would sit with his back to the crowd. Can you imagine going to a class like this? He would sit with his back to the crowd.
How did you hear him?
Well, I sat across from him. I sat against the wall. There was a bookshelf behind me, and he was sitting here. And then there were like, around this table were all the people who've been with him for years, and the whole rest of the room, it looked like this, was all, you know, just people staring at his back. Now, every single class, I would say to him, Rebbe, wouldn't it be better to have you sit at least at where you sit on Shabbos, the long table? He would sit on the wide part. So can you at least sit on the end where you sit on Shabbos anyway? So everyone can see you. So the Rebbe's look like, he just looks back at his book, you know. I asked for 2 years straight. And he finally acquiesced and went to sit there. Okay, so his back's to the crowd. And this guy, Yonah Binyamin from Tzfat's in the class. He heard the class all night, blew him away, flew out to visit his dying grandmother in America. And she's not into Judaism at all, so he's like on a mission to like just get her to say Shema before she dies. And not only did he just get her to say Shema, but he actually gets her like into all kinds of subjects about Judaism. He was there for 3 weeks. So he got her into all kinds of subjects, and it was really going well. He calls the Rebbe on the third week. He called me to get the Rebbe's number. I give him the Rebbe's number. He calls the Rebbe, and he asks the Rebbe, you know, it's going so well with my grandmother. Maybe I'm supposed to stay a little longer and like keep it up. And the Rebbe says, maybe. And he says, well, what should I do? Because he thinks Hasidim tell you what to do. Hasidic Rebbe's, which they do. But he was like, well, what should I do? And he says, well, you'll make a decision, won't you? And he's like, well, I was kind of hoping the Rebbe would make that decision. He's like, yeah, everyone in this generation's kind of hoping that. I'm not from this generation. God punished me and put me in this generation. Figure out the pros and the cons and make a choice. So he figured out the pros and the cons. And he stayed 3 more weeks. I'm sitting across from the Rebbe the night Yonah ben Yamin gets back to Israel from the grandma. And he comes straight to the Rebbe, to the Rebbe's class. You ready for this? I'm facing the Rebbe. The Rebbe's got his back to the crowd. And Yonah walks in the door. I haven't seen Yonah in 6 weeks. So I don't know where he's been. Because he didn't call me back and let me know. So Yonah walks in the door. The Rebbe swivels his chair. He has a swivel chair. Swivels his chair around. Looks at the door and says, what's it feel like to make your own decisions? He had never seen this guy in his life, the Rebbe. The only time he had ever been there was sitting in a class with the Rebbe, looking at the Rebbe's back. The Rebbe had never seen him before. Okay, that's enough Rebbe stories. Let's go back to our class. You know what I realized? I'm not prepared yet to do God. I created a whole curriculum called God Hates Religion. And I know it's like kind of interesting, but I don't think I've got my act together yet to really nail it. So is there something someone wants me to go on right now? Because we told Rebbe stories. We talked about God hating religion.
I have questions on this.
Yeah. Question.
You were saying how they all articulate better. You said it's a Kabbalist extension, but you didn't explain what they're, like from the ground, that you can see what they're articulating.
What they would be articulating?
So you're saying that answer.
It's a theology of Judaism. The theology of Judaism. Oh, you know what? Let me just finish with this. There's no way for me to tell you what they'd be articulating. I'm doing my best to articulate Jewish theology in these classes. That's why you're here. I mean, that's what I generally do in here. So I'm doing my best to articulate that. I'm sure my Rebbe would kill me for half the things I'm saying because I'm botching it. Like, you guys are hanging on my words most of the time, and I'm just like botching it the whole time. And my Rebbe would be like, couldn't believe that how badly I'm doing. It's what you'd call almost inarticulable to articulate our tradition. Our foundations are prophecy, and we're part of a prophetic tribe. And I will share you this. Would you potentially give 10, forget the $10 a month for me. Would you give $10 a month to resettle a tribe of Amazon jungle people who McDonald's cut down their rainforest? And now they're all hanging around Buenos Aires in ripped jeans and tank tops. I mean, the whole tribe's hanging around, the streets of Buenos Aires. But we know who they are because we took very good inventory when McDonald's came and took away their part of the jungle. We've now gotten the government to give a parcel, and we're going to actually help the tribe get back to the jungle. So would you help National Geographic with this undertaking to get the tribe back? Would you guys be interested in that, and like trying to help the tribe get back to themselves now that they're basically dying and disappearing into Westernism, and not to mention all the diseases that exist outside the jungles and the cities and stuff? They're starting to vaccinate their children. They're vaccinating the tribal children for diseases that don't exist in the jungle. You guys would be interested in that? So 85% of the Jewish people today are in Buenos Aires, meaning they're walking around outside the tribe. And here's the freaky thing. Normally when someone leaves a tribe, there's the tribe and they left. When you have 80% of the tribe living secular lifestyles, when 85% of the tribes living secular lifestyles, and then of course they set up like Hebrew schools and stuff, and temples, and very iconic little Jewish religious places. So it would be very easy for you to grow up there and think you're Jewish, meaning like you're part of something, when in fact you're like light years away from the tribe and the tribal tradition and the tribal lifestyle. You understand? When your tribe has adopted a way to live in exile as secularists, and here's the other freaky thing. I just had a group of about 40 kids here today at noon. So I asked anyone who had secular parents, they all raised their hand. How many have secular grandparents? So about 5 of the 40 raised their hand. And then I said, how many have secular great-grandparents? Nobody, not one. So I said to them, either you're gonna get back in touch with the tribe or your family line's going extinct. You're going extinct because we just proved it. We just proved it. That if you think you can pretend you're part of a tribe because you have a local temple, or you think you're gonna send your kids to Hebrew school, no. You're gonna be swallowed up by the Western monster. Rome will get you, just as Rome has gotten so many other cultures. And Rome has gotten us too. We're part of a tribe whose prophetic tradition is inarticulable, except for as good as I can do, or Rabbi Ellis, or Rabbi Neckmeyer, and obviously we can't touch some of the other rabbis, but they're not coming into Asia Torah, I'll tell you that. Certainly not teaching co-ed. You know, they're just not coming in here. But whatever, they could articulate better than us, but you're part of this tribe. And how crazy is it? How crazy is it that all that 85% of the Buenos Aires Jews who have fallen out of the tribe are going to use intellectuals who poke holes in infantile theologies and use them as the basis for their secularism. That's crazy, right? That's crazy. It's already 4:07, and there's a tour. Tell us about the tour.
We're starting 5 minutes ago. There's many of the Kotel tunnels along the Kotel underneath the border. It's really interesting. You've never seen it. And we're starting 5 minutes ago, so please come now.
Okay, everyone going on the tunnel tour, this is the ultimate tour of the old city, or of Israel, really.
Thank you.
Yeah. And a great place to pray. You'll be right across from the Holy of Holies. Yeah.
I want to ask something. A lot of the time when you get an atheist person